So, pragmatic and marketing, two terms that feel very lean to me. So this, Steve and I were talking about this talk that I actually did like a year ago when I was working at Duo Security, which is another startup in town here that is quite an early stage company now. It's quite a ways beyond startup. I joined there when there were about 6 people in 2012 when I moved to town, and I found that product management and product marketing were these terms that like I had been doing a lot of the activities in them, but there's no real like kind of basis for it. You can read a lot of blogs, a lot of different stuff out there. And then I came across this training that's literally called Pragmatic Marketing. It's put out, it's the name of the company. I'll talk a little bit more about that. But I found it to be like the best training that I ever took. And not that I've taken a lot, but most training isn't that great. And I found it was a really helpful framework for not just deciding what to build, but taking it from like the idea, and let's say like in lean terminology, like you've sort of validated the idea. How do you then figure out what to build first, how to market it? And so that's what this talk's about. And I'm going to jump right into it. So I took the training out in Boston. They do this in cities all around the country, even in Ann Arbor, every so often. Just show of hands, has anyone heard of pragmatic marketing before, like the organization, sort of, kind of? Okay. If you're not in product management or product marketing at a larger company, that's not surprising. I hadn't heard of them either. And so, so this talk is really about what I learned. And I want to make it relevant to anyone that is already familiar with the lean canvas, lean startup circle kind of ideas. Explain why it's important, what the heck it is. Like, are we talking about marketing here? Are we talking about product management, strategy? Answers all of the above. And a little bit of how you can apply it. So, my credit and disclaimer. So I lifted most of these ideas directly from like the pragmatic marketing like initial training. It was a 3-day training. I'll explain it in a bit. I guess all I could say is like I highly recommend it, and that I only take credit for a little portion of some of my original ideas in here. So everyone's heard this quote, like ideas are cheap. It's all about execution. But what's missing here? Does anyone? I mean, I believe this, right? But what do you think? Anyone know? Like, is that it? Is it just like execution? The short answer is no. Of course, it's not just about execution. You can spend a ton of time doing something and not get anywhere. And if anyone's worked in a startup, you can be very familiar with this. So it's really about like first you have to have a strategy, then you put a plan together, and then execution. If you go right to execution. It's a crapshoot. Like you might be terribly successful. You might be in this like market that's just huge, and you can go and execute, and like you'll be successful. But just like lean provides a framework for validating the idea. Pragmatic marketing is a framework for, hey, you got an idea, you got some initial validation of it. How do you then take that and actually turn it into one, a product, and two, market that product or reach the right people? That's the gist. So who should care about this? And the first 2 titles there are the ones that primarily attend pragmatic marketing, but when I attended it, we also went with our head of engineering, we took somebody from user experience, obviously founders, who everyone in this room is. Whether you know this, what product management or product marketing is, doesn't really matter. The concepts in here, I think, you'll find very applicable. And the concepts, again, while pragmatic marketing has focused on larger companies, totally is relevant to companies of all sizes.
Can I add one thing really quick?
Yeah.
So we have a lot of new people here today, but this Venn diagram Brian's got up here reminds me of one I've presented on before, and that it's innovation occurs at the intersection of customer desirability, business viability, and technology feasibility. So you kind of have customer problem and solution all captured here as well. So it's good to see the overlap.
Tons of overlap with lean, and that's a good thing. So if you take nothing else away from this, focus all of your energy on this first bullet or first underlined statement until you get that. There's a lot of the few words in there, but they're deliberate. So focus on finding that unmet need, not just a need that is unmet in a way that you can uniquely meet it. And then use this framework basically that once you've identified that to go and refine, figure out exactly what to build in what order and how to bring your solution to market. So I'll just go through this quickly. These guys have been, basically this slide saying they've been around for a while, been doing this at companies. You name a company that has a product, they'll likely have somebody who's been through this training. I couldn't believe they've been around for, since '93. It's amazing. In a session that I went to, it was about 50 people in Boston, and so you can see there's companies, like a lot of software companies, not surprisingly. Acquia is a content management company. Blackboard does learning systems. Seagate makes hard drives. As well as some medical technology and related association, this Canadian Medical Association. You don't always think of a company having a product, but even if they're collecting a mailing list and they're providing some kind of service, if it's very scalable, the concepts here apply. So they go through, they have like 6 courses or 6 classes that you can take. Everyone has to take foundations, and then one I would describe as more focused on building the product and how deciding exactly what to build and when, and these other ones more around how to bring it to market and launch. And so the ones I took foundations, market, and launch. But foundations covered really everything here, and then they get just deeper in these other areas. So this crazy chart, I call it their periodic table. They basically, like engineers who are figuring out how to do marketing and product management, they basically took these 30 blocks, which are any company of decent size. Like you're going to have to do some of these things depending on what your sales model is at your company, and they put it in one chart, and they even designed their logo after it. But basically, it combines these elements of product strategy, product building, which is the technical side, and then everything on the right is marketing. Again, also another why you should care. Basically, like don't reinvent the wheel. Like if you've gone and you're in the business of building and selling a product, this is a really great framework. Like I've been in the trenches. I've seen the academic presentations on how to launch a product, and I just found yep, it's even in the name. And basically it's how to determine if a product should be built. That's a lot of concepts which you're already familiar with, but this sort of they have their own take on it that's very lean-esque. And then basically everything you need to do to bring it to market, from figuring your market segments out to if you're in a larger company or even a smaller company, who does what. This was very, very helpful for me, even being in a startup at the time. It was only 40 people, but figuring out who owns what, as far as hey, we have our marketing copy might be owned by a marketing communications department, but the actual core messaging is owned by product marketing. Different roles, and companies screw this up all the time. So it's nice to see this framework in a clear way. So no news to this room, other than maybe does anyone know what that thing is on the right? That picture? Ever heard of it? It's like an internet connected refrigerator, and it was built. I don't recall if it's Samsung or somebody else, but basically thought it'd be really cool to build this internet connected refrigerator. Turns out no one really wanted it. It got installed in a few homes. It's $10,000. And that's the ante pattern here. So it's about getting out into the market, not whatever you can dream up of building, but getting input from the outside. They have these pragmatic rules, which are very short and to the point. Obviously, know your customer, get outside the building.
Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah. So I don't know. This Drecker quote kind of sums it up. So name of marketing, and I'd say even more largely like deciding what to build or the goal of your product, insert product, theme of a product, is to know and understand the customer so well that the product or service fits him and sells itself. So basically, if you were describing your product, just like Steve kicked off, he's like, describe it in terms of the problem that you're solving, not in terms of what your tool or your widget is. If you're starting from the product and you're building that well, sort of like the rest will follow. Everything will be so much easier. It's really hard to do that, by the way. Like I'm not like oversimplifying, trying to say like this is easy, but it's like such a common pattern to fall into. Oh, but this tool does this thing in this way, and it's just you've got more work to do. You might even have something super original, but if you're not communicating it in the way of in the context of the problem, which really only comes from knowing the customer super well. So I hear a lot of, and I see a lot of startups that are like, oh, we're scratching our own itch. Well, that's great if you can make that work, and your itch happens to be a market that's huge and has a huge unmet need. Like, more power to you. But that's just not the case with most problems. And so net, like, go and talk to as many people as you can about the problem. When people ask me to pitch at New Tech, so we were just talking about, my first questions is like, how much customer validation have you done? And I actually don't even care if you've built a product or I want it. The idea like catches my attention, great, but really it's about how much input have you got on this that you're actually solving something that people want. All right. Any questions on any of that?
I have a comment.
Okay.
I'm not trying to steal your show.
Yeah, go for it. No, fill in the blanks too.
In the meetup group, we've done a session about concept known as customer discovery. Brian actually said, get out of the building. That's the process of getting out of the building, understanding your customer, not just on the surface of like, oh, do you like my idea, but really understanding the core problem, what they're currently doing to solve it, workarounds they have. Just empathy is like the key word of that. We've done a session on that here before, and the slides are posted in Meetup if anyone kind of wants more foundation on that concept. Because I come from an engineering background, and it's amazing how many engineers kind of skip over it, say, oh yeah, I talked to like a few people, and my idea is so cool, it can do this and this and this. But without that foundation, it's really hard to properly validate demand. So.
Yeah, I'll tell. I like hearing the mistakes people made. So I'll tell you about a mistake I made in this regard. I've paid too much attention to industry analysts in the past. I don't know if anyone's done that. Like if you read like Forrester, Gartner reports, and you say like, "Wow, these guys are the experts, right? They must know it all." And it's not a bad input. Just don't use that as your only input. If you're only telling me like you're assuming basically that these analysts have done enough customer research, and frankly, like, yeah, they've done some, but like, you don't know how good it is. Like, if you don't do it directly, you're not going to tap into like the very visceral sort of responses that people give you when you start hearing about their problems.
Secondary research versus primary.
Yeah.
You gotta do primary.
Yeah. And
I've kind of maybe a dumb question. So are you looking more of just for a visceral response from a few people, or are you looking for just data from a lot?
You're looking for themes. You're looking for you want it to be an unmet need that has a lot of pain, and like they haven't yet, like they may not even be looking for a solution, but really initially you're looking just for the pains. Like, are there some common pains? And I'll get into like segmenting your market and like how there might be different types of customers that you have. But yeah, you're looking for maybe a theme of pain. I don't know if anyone would add on to that at all.
We get that question a lot, or I do. Like, how many people do I need to talk to? There's really no magic number. When we're working with like students, we push for like 100 interviews to kind of get that big number. I would argue at this stage it's definitely more qualitative, and it's really important for founders to do, because a lot of the insights and themes you get out of it are more kind of a gut feeling almost from listening to the interviews. There's a lot of unspoken communication, even like how people react to when you bring up problems, like them literally leaning over and their eyes dilating kind of thing. So
I'll give some examples of questions in here too when I get into like customer research, and I think those are always good examples to think like how to set up these questions, how to ask these open-ended questions. All right, so these pragmatic P's: product, price, promotion, place. Won't test you guys too long. The one big thing that's missing here, this is, these are always what people think about when they're building a product. What's missing? The problem.
yes.
So who, of the four on the top, which one do companies put too much focus on, especially tech companies?
Price.
Okay, that's one.
I'd argue product.
Yeah, it's product. Yeah, they want to talk about their tool, their hammer, and why it's better. If you do nothing else, again, I remember from this presentation, talk about the problem. Whereas one of the members on our board right now likes to tell me and give advice. He says, it's not a problem, you want to talk about the opportunities. I still like problem, I think that's clear. All right, so that framework you saw earlier, like I want to simplify it. So basically, think about anything that is strategic, meaning like, identifying the problem, identifying the customer, sort of being on the left of this, everything execution oriented over on the right. Again, the purpose for this was more for larger organizations who have distinct roles that can focus on a couple of these boxes. It's not to say you have to go and memorize these or do all of these. It's different for each business. But this is super helpful for, even if you're in a company, like I was at Duo at the time and we were only 35 or 40 people when I took this, and it was actually super, super relevant. I saw all the pain of no one owning, if multiple people own something, no one owns it. And that happened a lot. And then it stretches from less technical. So I'd say more, if you go the product marketing, product management divide, less technical to more technical. What happens, and this is related to talking about the product first, is that a lot of times we just like want to go and execute, right? Like we want to go and we want to go to a trade show and immediately start or build this product, build the MVP. The problem with this, it's not to say like thou shalt not execute anything until you have the full plan baked out. But the problem with doing execution first is that you don't really know what you're doing because you haven't identified your problem clearly enough. And so basically this chart of 30 activities, it's saying start on the left, spend a lot of time up front, as much as you can on the left, and then work over to the right, because everything on the right is so much easier if you have your problem, your customer, your types of customers really well defined. And really this could be lean startup circle in one box is just get the market problems part right. And market problems is a way of just saying a cluster of different types of customers, problems that, it's a bunch of customers that might be different in what their business looks like, but their problem is the same. So a shared problem. And they're reachable, they're in some kind of market that you can get to. So think not Fortune 500, but small service businesses that cater to a family or something like that. And then obviously what problem you're solving for them. So this is my version of a business plan I like to think about on what we forced ourselves to do when applying pragmatic marketing at Duo. I'm doing it now again at Nutshell. Is that you should really take everything you know and get it on the single page. If it's longer than a page, that's what you know about the market and the problem. It's probably too long. If you can't get it to that point, you still have more work to do. This is really hard, right? And most people's business plans, they say, are really long. And that just means you've got a lot more work to do to simplify it. If you haven't looked at any successful startups that have exits pitch decks, highly recommend doing that. It's fascinating. You learn a ton. LinkedIn's Series B pitches online, complete with Reid Hoffman's like context of exactly what they were thinking through on each of these. That's not one page, but I bring that up as an example to see like this is somebody who really, really, really thought about the problem deeply and also the strategy of how to get to market.
I got a question on this.
Yeah.
So when you say distill it into one page, is that a tool like Lean Canvas or Business Model Canvas, or do you mean written, or?
I guess it's whatever. I don't have specific recommendations on the tool. I can tell you some things that should be in it. But it's really, I mean, problem, who are these people that have it? If you could describe different clusters, what's the, you can get to competition or what's the status quo and why are you a unique solution to it? I mean, it's really stating those things. I say one page, I think, because like the goal here is brevity and as a forcing function to get more specific. There's a bunch of ways that you could do that. So this is also, if anyone's worked in a software company with a sales team, not picking on sales teams, I like sales teams, but it's often like what you'll hear is just the people who are loudest will tell you, this is the pain point. And sales and support, frankly, have a really awesome view of the customer. That's what they're doing every day. But they shouldn't be, just like that analyst ante pattern I described earlier, like it shouldn't be the source. If you are a founder, if you are somebody that's responsible for product strategy, like you can't put those degrees, you should get input from them, but you shouldn't let that decide what you're going to build. I really, really like how they describe this, and you could extrapolate this to a bunch of other ways, but you think of like when people make feature requests, like, oh, if the product just did this. That's the noisy 20% of the market. Those are the ones that are actually willing to take the time to talk to you. What you should be focusing on, the ones that never even bothered going to your idea forum and submitting an idea, or never called into support, or went to your website once and you lost them because they didn't really understand what you did. So I think about that of focusing on the quiet 80%.
I would add into there.
Aren't the 20% though the passionate group who would really want to use this thing, and wouldn't you want to interact with them more?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. Not if they happen. If that 80% is loud, let's say like of your market, like if like really 80% of it's loud, like that's great. Like, and you have some passionate people, you should listen to them. But I guess like the point of this statement is that don't take that as like, well, I talked to these 10 people and they all really have this problem in a big way. Maybe get a larger sample size or figure out how you're extracting from ones that are not saying it to you where you actually had to pull it out of them. And like in the details that they have recommendations of where to find these folks, it's sort of like, what are their watering holes or equivalent thereof? Like conferences can be good because you get all these people in one place and like you are asking open questions to them. But I think the point is don't just listen to the ones that are coming to you. Find them.
I would say, just to add on to that, because this is a great one here, is that, so an example on either side of those, we've got, I go and meet with our clients, and then sort of take it back to development. And so I was meeting with one client who was really quiet. He was actually the offsider of a business owner, and he never would say anything. And, I was talking about one particular feature. And, it was very casual. I was very unhyped, and I just let him talk for a long time, and he completely solved it because he's so quiet that he's used to not speaking up. So he's used to finding solutions in his own brain of how to work around it. He doesn't make noise, he solves problems. So by just listening to him, it was luck, he's actually outlined a whole feature set that we'd thought of the tip of it, but he just did the whole roadmap. Like he could have been a product developer at that point. And then on the noisy side, we've got a sales rep who's very noisy. And salespeople, what they'll do is, when they're going in to make a sale, wherever their weakness is, that's what the customer will always smell out and ask objections around their weakness. It's very common. So they will often run into, until you train them the right way, they'll always run into the same objections. So they'll report back that there's this massive problem that there's really not. It's just that they are fearful of getting that question, and so they'll always run into it. And that's what happens with the noisy 20%.
All right. So market segments. So I again, like sort of the rest of the concepts in here, I felt like when I went into this training a year and a half ago that I knew a bit about this, but this sort of all just like solidified it for me. That's why I'm so excited to share this. Principle around a segment. So short definition, a segment is a group of individuals or businesses that share a set of problems. And I'll get into examples of ones that are and aren't. And so in every one of these segments, you have these three buckets. There's actually kind of a sub-bucket here that's not called out just yet. Customers, evaluators, and potentials. I'll go through and define these. So customers are people who've gone through the process to evaluate solutions to a problem that they've identified they've had. And they have actually purchased a solution to this. So in my world, CRM software, somebody's like, I need to do better than spreadsheets and email. They went out and evaluated solutions for their problem, and they actually bought something. Now, there is two parts to customers. There's the customers that you have, and then there's your competitors' customers. And you obviously want to think about both of these as being part of it. And your strategy for reaching each one of these types of customers in each segment should be different, or you should be thoughtful about how you're doing that. It's not this like spray all to everyone. So one question might be obvious, how are you reaching your competitors' customers? Now remember, if it's a competitor's customer, you don't have to describe the problem to them as much. And they've already like had a solution in front of them. So the pitch to them is going to be different than a pitch to, definitely different than the potential. Evaluators, very similar to customers. They know they have a problem. They might be trying some things out, but they haven't actually purchased a solution. They might just be even window shopping for their solution, but not even that far into evaluation. Again, how are you reaching every evaluator? Potentials are the most interesting though. So, I mean, and this is, obviously these are all broad strokes, but 2/3 of every market segment, unless it's a super mature product market, it's people that we think have a problem, and that based on our research, but they don't even know they have it yet. And this is always the biggest segment, and always the one I think that a lot of product companies spend the least amount of time on, to some degree. I mean, some people really get this right, but like just like that closeness to the product, you're going to be closer to people who already understand the problem. What are you doing to educate people that don't even know they have the problem yet? So I like examples. I mentioned these earlier, and I saw this like in analyst speak, and even at Duo, we were talking about being a mid-market security company. What the hell does that mean? That just means we sell to businesses. Like we've really liked customers who were 500 to 5,000 end users. Okay. I can't target that. Like, and I saw marketing, it was really hard, right? Because it's just so broad, and there weren't these common themes. It wasn't a market segment. It was a way to describe maybe a lot of our customers at the time. Or there was some pattern there, but you can't do from a marketing standpoint. What do you do with that, right? You're just like, I don't know, I take out an ad in like Sky Mall magazine or something because people who work for Global 2000 happen to fly a lot.
I've seen this on the more consumer-facing side too. These are, I think, more like B2B examples, but a lot of people are like, oh, my customer is like age 20, male, and in college or something. Maybe kind of a good place to start, but in general, we push people to get away from just demographics, because that's not how people kind of think and make decisions. They don't go, oh, I'm a 20-year-old male, I want to buy this. They recognize the problem you're marketing to them, and they make the solution.
Yeah. So good examples are basically describing problems, I think, is a simple way to think about it. And then maybe if you can get even more specific, like you identified this problem that might not be the exact problem that you're solving, but it's this common trait amongst a group of people that you can target. Let's see how to say here. For each, again, this is like this each segment thing. Like you're more than likely you might think you have only one segment, but you almost certainly have multiple segments where whatever you're building can apply to. And the point here is that you want to think about these items independently, the competition independently, what you're bringing uniquely, the barriers to entry to that market, because you might have like 3 markets where you'd be like, man, our product is awesome for this, but the barrier for one, it might be like 2 degrees, really hard, long sales cycle. You don't have the time to do that. So all of these bullets are important to think about for each segment. Repeating what we were talking about earlier, answer to most of your questions is not in the building. This is obviously something that I've been saying to software companies that have been doing this for a while. Like you still got to talk to customers every day. Like I love when I hear about companies that say like, your first 30 days here, you got to be on support. Who was it? Automatic, the guys that make WordPress. Everyone who starts there has to work in tech support, like literally, or in customer support for I think like a full month. And that's a way to not like make you so far removed because you get into your specialty of marketing or some other area. The good news is most founders usually are talking to customers because they're both the salesperson, support person, and the product person. I like this statement too, and also super relevant. So customers, if you're only talking to customers, they're telling you about things that happened in the past. Evaluators are in the present, but potentials are telling you about the future. So places to find the quiet 80% we were talking about earlier. So this is going to be super dependent on the market that you're trying to reach, but like these are broad strokes of areas where you might be able to find people. Here are some of the open questions that I really like that you were asking earlier. Like, how do you, if you're always hearing from the noisy 20%, how do you actually tease out what's actually going on? And really, this is not about like, hey, I have this product that can print money for a penny on every dollar. Would you like it? Of course, they're going to say yes. But you're really trying to get at like what, not just even your product, but what's holding them back. Like, and this is like applies in consumer obviously as well. This deck is really, and the products are more B2B, but the same applies, right? So these are some good questions that you can seed with. Any other questions that people think of from seeing these, or has this worked for anyone when you've been doing some validation of maybe what you're building?
How they're currently solving their problem.
Yeah.
And how did you come to that solution?
Yeah.
That's huge because it shows they A, have the problem, B, know they have the problem, C, are actively seeking a solution, and D, hopefully it sucks, meaning they need you to develop a better solution.
Right.
The last one, what other great products have you seen lately? I like this one in B2B, especially when I'm talking to a group like, what are you using for communication? What are you using for email, for chat? What other sales software are you using? You might end up uncovering something that you didn't realize, like you're not that far from developing, and that is tremendously more helpful, or like is ubiquitous with everybody that you speak with. That's a really fun one. Open-ended questions.
Yep. Always ask why. I won't get into that, but always understand why it's a problem. It kind of gets to the core reasoning and decision making behind it. Yeah, and evaluating what they went through, even if it's like they've already bought your solution. Like, how did you evaluate this? I like those a lot too. We did that in reverse recently with some of you probably have heard of HubSpot. It's a marketing tool that even though we build a CRM, they also have one. We purchased it recently for doing more like bulk emailing and running a blog and some content marketing. And their head of product like interviewed our head of sales at Nutshell for an hour. And most of the conversation was spent on what was your process to, once you knew sort of the problem, like what did you search for? What terms did you use?
who was involved in it, like understanding that buying process. So I'm now sort of shifting to like once they've actually bought a solution, but it's terribly interesting. Like you'll learn a ton from it, even if it's not your product. Like tell me about how the last product that you bought, what process did you go through?
If we go back to the questions when you were asking about like what other things, instead of to the question why, instead of asking people why, I like to switch that out with what about that makes you think, or what, like the word why sometimes I feel like will get people a little bit defensive, where
Yep.
the what about, whatever you're saying kind of like opens them up and you're almost like giving them more credit. It's a very small subtlety.
Yeah, totally.
And it works like really well in like business meetings too, but with customers, I like that approach.
Yeah, there's an art to it.
Yes.
It's not. It gets easier the more you do it.
But I always want why. That's like what's going on in my head. I'm like, why?
When you're creating problem statements, these should be obviously bad and good. Again, it's get right to that pain. I look bad when I waste time doing it how I currently do it. Like that's actually what you want to capture in a problem statement. And this problem statement, by the way, is like going to be used internally. I'm sort of getting into like the team structure thing, but like when you're explaining this to other people, it's not. You're writing it down to say like you've really worked it through, but you're also doing this to make it easy to communicate to everyone else in the company that is helping you bring this product to market.
Well, I'm sorry, the rating of good bad, this is from the customer's perspective?
Sorry. This is this is just an example of like
Of an internal?
yeah, like an internal
Oh.
internal document. Yeah. Sorry, it's sort of like grab different pieces of this, but yeah, this is like when describing the problem
The
to
feature that you want to build.
yeah, call it the you can call it the problem statement for the product that you're building. Yeah, like looks better when you get to those like, or it's better if you're getting those emotional. I feel bad. I'm taking too much time. If you're not describing, if you're not have that problem statement written down, you still have work to do. Obligatory Seth Godin quote. Don't just listen to what people say, watch what they do, and then this is again getting that quiet 80%. And yeah, the sort of thing is like everyone's pragmatic marketer. I just like this is like when you're out and about talking to somebody. Like I always think about this when I'm like traveling for the holidays or something, and I'm meeting different people. You'll never know when this comes up, so just learn about people's problems. I mean, I mean, you kind of like it or you don't, but you'll never know where you're going to find this information. And to figure out their summary of figuring out like what you should actually go to build. You're looking for solutions. You're only going to build solutions for problems that are urgent, pervasive, and that the market's willing to pay to solve. So the rest of this is just a couple slides, and tell me if people are interested in this. I can skip over this, but I found this super interesting for being inside a product company and how things are divided and what the actual role of product management is when you have engineering, marketing, or I'm calling it marketing communications explicitly here, and sales. Each of those groups, dev, marketing, sales, their value is very easily measured because you're either selling something or you're not, you're either getting leads or you're not, you're building something or you're not. And product is this like amorphous, I don't know. It's the part in the middle that actually is super, super critical but doesn't have a direct output outside of what we've been talking about here, which is just clearly defining the problem and making sure that everybody is marching in the same direction. Here's how they...
I got a question on
Yeah.
teams. In your experience, have you seen, not necessarily a hard rule, but like kind of a minimum size of a team before you start to apply this?
Yeah.
Is it like immediately after you get behind the founders? Is it when you get like a dozen people? Is it?
It's that's a super good question. So I think of founders as being sales-led founders, marketing-led founders, or product-led founders, meaning like that's what they naturally gravitate towards. So if you're somebody that like you love to sell and you also are identifying like this really unique pain, complement yourself with those other two groups. So I think a lot of startups tend to have product-led founders, at least in that tends to work well, but it's not always the case. So one, plan no matter what that you need to spend a ton of time on product up front. So like if you're a co-founder or you're looking for a co-founder, you always hear about the technical co-founder. I think it's also super important to acknowledge, like, are you super passionate about marketing, about sales, and maybe you're not like the product co-founder, but you should find one. And I think in early days, like you're going to wear a bunch of hats, right? Like you're gonna be the product person, you're going to be the engineer, you're going to be marketing, you're going to be sales. I think once you get to, and this gets into sort of like product management. The sort of rule of thumb, I like the, has everyone heard of the 2 pizza box rule? This is like in large companies like Google and Spotify, they talk about like team sizes should never be bigger than enough that 2 pizzas couldn't fill. And like what they do is they have it's engineers and then 1 product person and maybe like 1 designer. They can ship something entirely with that group. So no hard and fast rules here. I think that the takeaway is like don't undervalue what even products saying like they have all the responsibility and no authority is a common term because you don't actually have anybody reporting to you. Maybe this is just what they say to make product people like me feel good. But it is you're sort of leading the quest, and the more that all these groups are aligned together, your odds of success are just that much higher. So I think I put this note in here before because in startups there is like a ton of overlap and not direct ownership. So that's the other thing you see when like if you've been through any like small companies that have scaled, is that you got to specialize. Otherwise, you'll just do all these things like, okay. I like this one a lot too, that if the product team doesn't do its job, which is clearly defining the problem, defining the market, explaining why we're unique, other departments will fill in here. And that means like marketing will come up with their own messaging. They might not be targeting, they might not be thinking about it in terms of segments and buyers. Sales, you don't enable sales properly, hey, they're going to sell. They just might sell to the wrong person. They might do a crappy job. And engineering will definitely build stuff, but it might not be valuable.
So you're saying if other departments fill that void, that's bad, and you don't want that bad. Yeah. So I mean, in early days, you're always going to wear multiple hats. But like basically, I think what it's saying here is like if you don't define that problem up front and you just go into that execute phase, your likelihood of success is much lower. So like if you jump ahead and say like, oh, okay, this problem statement, market segmentation. I just want to sell some stuff. Let's go spend some money on AdWords and get some stuff up online. Will you be successful? Maybe, probably not. So I think it's reiterating that. Maybe not so much that you need this distinct team, but you need to do that work that product does before going on to all these other activities.
Product manager is responsible for keeping the money under wraps too, because otherwise everybody just goes off and spends unlimited amounts of money in each of those corners of that triangle.
Yeah. So that's sort of like where the rest of like all these different areas get into. Pragmatic marketing is really explicit in like. They have like a framework where you can like assess how important and if you have the resources to do like each of these blocks. You might have one that's like totally not important and really hard to do. Obviously, skip that. And you're probably going to have some that are super important that you're not doing at all right now. Let me see if I can give an example of that. Presentations and demos. So if your sales team is creating them and they're not aligned with like how you actually want to pitch the customer problem, that can be really bad. And you might be giving like 10 sales presentations a day. They might be highly impactful to your ability to succeed. So that would be an area that you obviously would want to invest in. If you're going direct, do you need to worry about, I think there's like a channel marketing or something in here.
Channel training.
Channel training, yeah. If you're going direct, or like that's not going to be maybe relevant to you. Yeah, less technical, more technical. Sort of the buckets down here when it gets into like roles like this is product management, product strategy, then like marketing and sales activities. But stuff
I have a
isn't.
question here.
Yeah.
If the one on the left is before you have a product, right?
Yeah.
What's win-loss analysis?
Sorry, were you saying this? No, this isn't before you have a product. So let me be clear. So this is saying like things that are more strategic in nature versus like actually activities going out to like reach customers or sell to customers. The reason why win-loss analysis is up there is because that's something a lot of people will skip over entirely. Like they might spend a lot of time on loss analysis, like, hey, why did we lose this deal? But like the actual like win analysis, that's a great section on that in Pragmatic Marketing of you want this to be like your product team should be doing this directly. This should not be secondhand. Just that like maybe it was the term you were using earlier, like first.
First hand versus second.
Yeah, like you want to be getting that directly. So the only one so they're sort of mixed and matched as far as pre-product, post-product. Market problems though is the one that absolutely has to be before you build something. But the rest of these are more this strategic to execution, less technical, more business to more technical divide. Any other one of these that jump out to anyone that they're just curious about, like what it means, or honestly, I'm not going to go through all of these, but
Special calls.
special calls. So that's like when you get that one customer who's saying like, I'm willing to spend an extra $100,000 with you if you can tweak the product in this way, or like they're above and beyond what your sales team would normally be able to provide. So you sort of pull in the expert, pull in the CTO. Maybe it involves customization, maybe it doesn't. But like, what's your process for that? How do you determine if that's worth getting the? I always go to the technical person or even the CEO. Like, what determines that? So I think that's sort of in scope of what they mean by that.
What's thought leadership program?
Yeah, that's a good one in marketing. So this is like you write a piece, like say you're like sort of in this new area and you're trying to create mind share around this problem that you're solving. You're gonna publish maybe a paper, combination case study. It's sort of like equivalent, I don't know, I think to some degree of like an academic paper in business. You know, like you're HubSpot comes to mind. I was just talking about them. So they got around this concept of inbound marketing. Like nobody wants to get a cold email. When's the last time you actually clicked on one of those spam emails? It's all about inbound. So they coined the term inbound marketing. They said it's all about getting things on your website to drive people there. People are smart. They're going to go out. They're going to search Google. They're going to go shopping. So all their thought leadership was around trying to convince people to not rely on complete outbound marketing, but rather flip it. And they happened to coin this term and had a lot of great SEO juice around inbound marketing. They called their conference that's still called that. It's called inbound. So yeah, thought leadership is, I mean, it's a just be sure, like, it's a tough one to say, like, when do you invest in it? If it's cheap for you to invest, if you already, like, love talking and writing about this stuff, like, just start doing it. But you probably don't want to invest a lot of resources into it until you really feel like you're in the right direction. It can just be a big time suck if you're not, one, if it's not cheap for you to do, and two, if you don't really know if it's the right place to get the most attention.
Any interesting thoughts they brought up on pricing? And that could go on as its own topic, but maybe you can give us the.
Yeah, pricing I'll hold aside, and I'll redirect your question to the one right below that, the buy builder partner. Yeah, no, that's sort of a separate one. I don't know. I don't have anything really great to share on pricing for this deck right now, other than it is more. Yeah, I don't know. In the general statement I was about to say, I was going to say it's more art than science. It just is like you're never going to. But I'm not an expert on that topic, so I'm gonna dodge that one.
One thing I like is value-based pricing versus cost-based.
For sure.
Software, it's really easy to do value-based pricing, but if you're building an actual like physical product, you don't want to just do, okay, it costs us this much and we mark it up X%. Focus more on what is the value you can extract in a good sense from your customer for you.
Totally, yeah. I think actually most B2B software is priced in that way.
So do all of these have to be hit on for things
No.
properly, or
No, totally not. Like, I'm glad you brought that up. Like that whole like exercise where you go through and say like, they have like this worksheet where you say like, how important is this to your business? Like you assess it, and then like, do you actually have the resources to do this internally? And you want to match the high impact, low effort ones together. It's totally dependent on your business. You might not have a sales team. You might just purely be marketing, and people might be self-service. So I think they wanted to come up with this comprehensive set of activities to sort of. I think the idea is like to really drive the point home that if like this thing is really important to you and you don't have an owner for it, that's a problem. You're saying like, hey, we're let me find what here. Like, say thought leadership, like a couple people in the company identify like thought leadership is like super critical to us. Well, who owns it? Well, no one. Okay, that's probably a problem. So I think that's why like they carry this whole like periodic table through their logo and everything else to say that if you're not to sort of take out like, okay, this stuff isn't like these broad topics. You can actually get pretty specific with what you need. So pick what's important to your business and then assign owners. So yeah, to wrap up, I think I've covered sort of most of this through it. I don't really need to read everything on this slide. What else can I sum up for people? Was this helpful? Was this anything like you thought it would be? I mean, I know it had like marketing that title. You might think of this as being like a crash course in it. It's sort of the level before you actually do marketing, but it's all the inputs that should go into marketing, that should go into sales, and obviously go into product. And
it's actually incredibly depressing to me because all the things you said are problems I've been doing. So I'm not sure if it's depressing or whether there's a refreshing because there's a way out.
You're here.
You won't waste more time.
Yeah, well, I mean, and certainly challenge it, but it sounds like you're buying it, but maybe there's a different way to do it. What's one of them that we can talk through?
Well, you were talking earlier with hit me is, who is your primary customer?
Yeah.
Everything I've done as a technologist has been problems. I'm trying to solve my own problems. And I'm saying, every company I've been into, I had this issue. Therefore, I'm building a product around that. Maybe worthy, but you kind of mentioned, what was it, scratch your own itch, I think is what you said.
Yeah.
And I guess my biggest, I don't know how to get out. So everything you've talked about kind of feels like an established business. It's like, wait, I'm kind of founder number one. I don't even know who to reach out to, other than the people in this room who I'll go shake their hand and say, hey, let's go talk about your problems and see how my tool. I don't even know how to start that process. I think maybe it might have been an earlier meeting. I think there was some slide that you mentioned that were some of the customer-driven, customer.
So you're talking about the discovery piece of it?
Exactly.
I think yes. So some of this stuff obviously is going to be more relevant, especially as it gets specific to a large organization. But I think your reaction is right. Even on a team of one, you're gonna find if I said something and you're like, oh, I should really answer that. you're already using this. Maybe like this whole like framework, you're only going to use a tiny piece of it, but that might be a super valuable piece to you.
You know, it definitely was valuable. I was kind of making a joke. It was depressing, showing.
No, you're just being like honest. Everyone else is just like, yeah, I've never been in a company like that. I don't know what that's like.
I think it's really valuable too from to see it as a large scope, because I think it ticks all the boxes, especially from the periodic table view.
Yeah.
It really gives you a top-down view of everything that you would need. I think like as a founder though, like I found when I'm starting things, I'll use the business model canvas. Something that's more. It's
because you're all focused on that problem side, like identifying the problem deeply.
Yeah, and it's visual, and you can also kind of point yourself to customer. Just the process flow of thinking allows you to. So I think with that, like I love looking at that and maybe going through it, ticking some boxes and saying, okay, what am I doing at these couple things?
Yep.
But I think at times as an entrepreneur, you can get really bogged down.
Yep.
In the details, and I think it's important to be detail oriented, but you have to have a very quick cycle that you go through to get.
Totally. Yeah, that's why like I think this is even more relevant. Maybe not for when you're just still like discovering and validating the problem, but when you're saying like, hey, we've got something here. We've got 10 paying customers. We got 20 paying customers.
Right.
How do I get this in front of 2,000 paying customers? So maybe, and also like my hope is that it like demystifies that part of it, which can maybe feel like intimidating if you've never done it before. Look at the parts; it's not that complicated. I mean, yes, there's a lot of work in all these parts, and you're going to need help. But
as you're scaling a business, I mean, I think it's a phenomenal tool because just to visually see all of those channels that you focus on is really important.
Yeah.
It's kind of ironic because we're looking at this and we can almost use this as an actual product and say, okay, like we are the potential customers of this actual product.
Oh, totally.
Into the future now. So.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, no, they're not paying me to tell them to go take their training. I just found that super useful. Maybe I just had like the best instructor ever, or it was like it hit me at the time. You know, like when you say like if you don't go and get an MBA right after you're in school, like wait and then go back later. It felt like that. Like I was in industry for like 7 years, and I'm like, man, this is really hard. There's got to be a better way to do this. And then it was just like the light. It's like, oh my gosh. Well, cool. That's all I got for this.
Thank you.